The digital economy has delivered many firsts, as we've heard throughout today. It's also delivered what is really the first truly global antitrust challenge that we, and in that I'm including business, enforcers and consumers, have faced. With some exceptions, we see largely global businesses offering the same products and facing the same consumer, supplier and business responses to those products across the globe. Yet, as we've also heard, the frameworks which exist and those which don't yet exist but are being discussed are overwhelmingly national. And that was referred to several times this morning as the national colliding with the global. The scale of the welfare gains which the digital economy has delivered is immense, from allowing us to communicate almost instantly and at virtually no cost with people anywhere in the world, to facilitating the availability of microfinance, which has lifted many women and their families out of poverty in developing countries, to also speeding up diagnoses in healthcare, which is really important for increasingly ageing populations. But it has also been, and will continue to be, a source of considerable consumer detriment, a number of which Andrew Tyree mentioned in his opening remarks this morning. Getting the balance right between these two is very much the exam question of the day facing governments and others across the world. Fortunately, as a competition authority, we only, and I say only in those annoying sort of air quotes that are invisible, have to worry about these trade-offs only insofar as they raise competition issues. That is quite a challenge, and one which is heightened by at least three factors, which I think have been very prominent in the discussions today. The first of those is speed. So the speed at which technology has evolved and will continue to evolve, and therefore the risk that we are worrying about the boring end of the curve, as Martin Coleman put it this morning, when the world has already moved on. The challenge of even knowing where the boundaries of the digital sector are is another key issue. The boundaries between the digital economies and the analog world are blurred now, and that distinction will really be blurred further to the point that it will probably make no sense at all. And the only question really is how quickly that happens. And that dynamic becomes especially important as we think about developing regulation. So as Magnus Brook put it earlier, we won't be able to write into any future legislation the type of technology to which it applies. The third factor, which I've already alluded to, is that inherent in a global set of challenges is the need for a global response, which our institutions and legal systems are pretty poorly equipped to deliver. We heard earlier today from senior business people which emerging technologies will have the most significant impact in the medium term, how regulation affects the development of new business models, and how, unless it's properly designed, it can favour incumbents. And we also heard about how businesses are changing to address concerns about data and privacy, as well as differing views as to whether that's happening fast enough. What came across very clearly to me is that even as we tackle today's challenges, we really need to start having conversations like the ones we've had today about the challenges which are just around the corner, AI and machine learning being a prime example of that. We also spoke about the development of smart regulation, not only here in the UK, in the response to the recommendations of the Furman report, but also in Germany and Australia, and how that needs not only to be nimble enough to be future-proof, given the speed at which technologies develop, but also to have the need for swift and effective sanctions for breach of any future regulation, to avoid the long, drawn-out antitrust processes which Isabel da Silva alluded to, and which all too often have resulted in pretty ineffective remedies. We heard a range of opinions about the downsides of regulation, that it always favours the incumbents, and that it stifles innovation. As a competition authority, we're very aware of those risks, but the evidence also tells us that saying it's all too hard and doing nothing is not an option. And as Commissioner Slaughter exhorted us earlier, we too can do hard things, and I think that needs to be our focus. And finally, the need for an international response to many of those challenges. The CMA has taken a leading role in these global discussions for some time now, and we'll continue to do this as part of our digital strategy and as we complete our report into online platforms later this year. Today has been a really valuable part of that discussion. So a final word of thank you to all our speakers for being here, despite the rapidly evolving health situation, and for bearing with us as the format of this event changed, perhaps not quite as rapidly as some of the business models, but heading that way. And thank you also for some of those who joined us online. We really appreciate that that wasn't a first choice of medium for those that wanted to be here in person, but it certainly ended up being an appropriate challenge given the focus of this event. Thank you.